and welcome to another book review, book discussion. These are not all the books that I've read in the time being from the last video, but I'll talk about those books later since one of them is in my car, the other one already returned. So starting with another Celeste Ng novel. I think this is her first novel, Everything I Never Told You. My friend generously and kindly let me borrow this one because I enjoyed the other book, Little Fires Everywhere. This gives me very, very similar vibes. Lots of like family secrets and people like finding out things about their family like way later. And yeah, I mean parts of it were like kind of confusing for me, but I think as a whole, I read this. Yeah, as a whole, it was okay. I read this entire thing on the plane to New York, and that plane ride was like 4.5 to like 5 hours, but I think I finished it in like 2 or 3 hours. Like I just picked it up and then I was reading through it and then I just didn't put it down. So I finished the whole thing, and much like the other book that she wrote, it kind of had me thinking a lot about like Asian American families, because I think she talks a lot about that topic specifically in her books, and it just kind of made me think about like my own family and like just the generations that have like come, like our generations of family members who have escaped from like war and poverty and famine. And like I don't think that's really like necessarily related to this book in particular, but it just got me thinking about like my family, Asian American families, immigration, and also because I was reading this book on the plane, I was just thinking a lot about how, like the last time that my grandparents or great grandparents were like traveling or like anywhere close to moving countries or moving cities, it wasn't out of like pleasure or it wasn't out of leisure. It was because they were literally escaping. And so it was just really moving for me to think about that, because I'm like so blessed now, and like I have, like now I have my own job, and like now I have like these opportunities for myself to travel, and these were things that like my family didn't get to do back then. And so it was good for that. I don't know, but I can't tell you like what, like I can tell you what it's about, but I don't think like it was necessarily like tied into everything that I was thinking about. But anyway, next book, The Creative Act by Rubin. I've seen this all the time at Barnes & Noble and like bookstores and things, because it's, it's such a pretty like cover. It's like very aesthetic, very simple, minimalist, whatever, everything that's trending right now. And so, I kind of assumed it would be like another woo-woo book, which it kind of is, but at the same time, it is an incredible book that, personally for me, because I think when I read this through, of course it uses certain like jargon and language that just can come off the wrong way and comes off like extra spiritual, and some people aren't into that, but I feel like that's sort of the language that I already like kind of use in my head when I'm thinking about these things, especially when it comes to art. So I felt like I could really relate. And actually a lot of, if not all, the topics that he's talked about, ideation, like crafting, experimenting, creating art, creating environments where art is possible, like they're all things that I've always felt like intuitively they were true, but I just didn't know how to word it. And I feel like everything in this book is a like literary materialization of like all those ideas that I've thought about in my head, and I could only really like think about in phrases and in sort of like imagery. It was really hard for me to put it all into words. So I really like that. Like I read half of this at Barnes & Noble, and then the other half I read at my friend's apartment when I visited her in New York. And so I finished the book at her apartment, and immediately I went to Amazon and bought my own copy, because it's just one of those books for me that I feel like I want to have at hand and I want to keep for a long time because it was so memorable for me. This is another Celeste Ng book. I took off the front cover because I have it like stored, don't worry, but Because I think with these like paper covers, when there's like a paper, what do you call that, like book cover in front, it's like it gets everywhere, it's falling off, and when I'm reading and I'm like having to take this around places, I don't want to have to deal with that, so I took it off for the time being that I'm reading it. I have not started it at all, but it seems like, again, it's about like Asian American family sort of vibes, so we'll see what it's like actually about. And I did read a couple of other books, but I don't have them right now. The other book that I read was called Cringeworthy by Melissa Dahl. I don't know, I just picked it up at the library when I was, I think when I was collecting some other books. I like just saw it, and then while I was browsing, I just picked it up. And it's because I've been thinking a lot about cringe and thinking a lot about like self-embarrassment, because I think when it comes to things like making videos on YouTube, or like, you know, hearing your voice back, like seeing the things that you've made, it's really easy to feel like super cringed out, even like a week after you've made it. And like, I'm sure I'll have that experience over and over again, but I sort of wanted to read a book on it and just kind of see like perspective about like what other people have to say about it, because it's a universal experience, it seems, and I want to know, like, is it something, like, maybe thinking about, like, maybe is it something that I should just become comfortable with? Like, what does it really mean for me to cringe at myself or at other people? Like, maybe that says more about my relationship to myself, and like, if I'm getting like a bunch of secondhand embarrassment like from somebody else, I feel like a lot of the times it has a lot more to do as well with like your relationship to yourself and how easily embarrassed you are with yourself, and sort of the kind of standards you keep for yourself too. So that was helpful. I mean, she was like very upfront about like her political views, which I don't really like when authors do that in their books, because it's like, I don't know, like what does that have to do with you know, the story, or like the point you're trying to get across? And I just really, I don't like when authors, like, they just already assume that you'll be on the same political stance as them, and so they make like glib comments or whatever about like politicians, and yeah, I get it, but yeah, other than that, I think it was pretty enjoyable. It was a quick read, and I think that's really, oh, I forgot one more book. I just finished Emily Ratakjowski, I think that's how you say her name, her book, My Body. And again, it was one of those books I kind of judged by the cover, or mostly like not by the cover, I judged it by its author. I don't know who Emily is, but I think from what I like vaguely remember, she's like a model or Instagram influencer, something like that. And so I'm like, oh man, is this just another one of these books where like they're talking about their life? I mean, it's valuable, but I think sometimes I'm like, kind of roll my eyes at that. But it was actually sort of, it was really insightful, actually. It reminded me of another book, but I cannot think of what book I'm thinking about. Maybe it was, I think it was Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, because both of them talk about like their experiences with fame, as well as with like being sexualized either like at a young age, or like the hoops that they have to go through to become famous and to like attain success in Hollywood and attain success in like, you know, the big world of like entertainment and the industry. So I think that's what that book reminded me of, but this one obviously was a little bit more potent with the sexualization, because, you know, she's literally like a model for whether it was a swimsuit company or like a video shoot or whatever it was. And it was a quick read. I also finished that book, I think in a day. I think I just like spaced it out during my lunch breaks, and then I read the whole thing. And I actually got to reading that because I went to one of the bookstores in New York, and then I think it was under the memoir section. I don't know if it was like memoirs regarding New York, because there were a lot of sections that had like New York specific books, but I don't think it was that. She does talk about certain things related to New York, because, you know, she was in New York for business and whatnot. But so that was also cool, because then I got to read different parts of like where she would stay at like her apartment, and like those were parts of the city that I had been to, like areas of Manhattan or whatever that I had actually visited, whether it was the day before or I was familiar with now. So I've had that experience a lot with books lately, especially with books that talk about artists or like famous people who like their struggle story originated or like had its big boom or whatever in New York. It's really fascinating to see and read those things and like directly connect it to like the places that I've actually stepped foot on. I think, yeah, that's really cool. So those are the books I'm reading. I will probably talk about this once I'm done, but I don't think I'll have it at that point because I have to give these 2 books back to my friend.